introducing and to say who we are, and then I'll do it.
Oh, we're
All right.
switching over right now. All right. Welcome, everyone. We've got a Stir Shaken webinar for you here. We've got Andrew Harrell with engineering and myself, Justin McClellan, with tech support.
Okay. Hello. Shall I begin? I guess. Do we how many
Go ahead.
did we have in?
We got 10 viewers in right now.
Okay. We want to wait a minute for more, or I guess they can watch it, right? So
This is going to be recorded and available on our channel permanently. So anyone who misses the intro, they can always go back and just rewatch the video from the beginning. Unfortunately, you can't ask questions live at that point, but any questions you have after seeing this video, you can send in to support@ipitomy.com or just give us a call. All right, over to you.
okay. So yeah, the purpose of this webinar is to kind of go over the changes that are relevant for caller ID that are related to the configuration of systems, what caller ID is going to be passed, and what's going to be allowed, and then how the FCC's new requirements on caller ID are going to affect people. So moving on, all right. So I'm not going to go over the whole history of Stir Shaken. Stir Shaken is just the kind of the idea of it's a set of protocols that dictate how we are verifying the identity of who's sending a call, essentially. There was a recent announcement that sort of that sped up the process on April 20th of this year. The FCC stated that all traffic must be validated by September, and by validated, they basically mean that intermediate providers and terminating voice service providers will be prohibited from accepting traffic from voice service providers that are not listed in this database called the Robocall Mitigation Database. And we weren't really sure, I guess, how it was all going to work at the beginning, but because they have some competing directives. But essentially, they require, originally there was this thing called Stir Shaken, and Stir Shaken is the way of signing a phone call. And if you implemented Stir Shaken, you didn't necessarily have to go into this robocall database, but they changed that because they realized that that they're going to need a way of validating everything, no matter what way you look at it. Like they're basically going to want to they want to make sure that traffic that's passed comes from valid providers, and then they basically made it so that a valid provider has to be in this robocall database. And there was an earlier directive that said that that once a provider could obtain a certificate to sign calls, they had to diligently pursue that certificate. So when they changed this rule on April 20th, they basically said, as long as you get in this database, you can get a certificate. And so everything kind of all of these different separate orders converge into the bottom line being that at the end of September of this year, you're going to have be signing traffic with either you're going to have to sign traffic, or you're going to have to certify with everybody that you're working with that you've implemented this, a way of mitigating robocalls. And mitigation means that you are actively working to stop robocalls from originating from your network. They're putting the burden on the on the people who are originating the phone calls. So that would be us in this situation. And the way to think of Stir Shaken is like it's pretty much let's see. Okay, so yeah, okay, so Stir Shaken is very much like a website like certificate, where you basically you go out, you generate a key, and then you get authority. Somebody who is considered an authority can sign your certificate, and then people can check with that authority to see what the situation is. The main difference, though, in this situation, I guess I'm starting from the bottom up, is that the certificate in this situation, like we get certificates, but but it's kind of like a sub certificate, and the main certificate is actually issued by a central authority controlled by the FCC, and they can revoke a certificate and thereby end your ability to send any phone calls. Um, so not complying with what I'm just about to go over um, would be, I guess, grounds for them to revoke your certificate. So essentially, there's going to be a lot more control on phone calls going forward. And one way to look at that here is that all calls, when we sign them, have to be signed by a valid certificate, and we have to attest to what level we trust the traffic at, right? So when and they have three different levels, right? They have level A. Oops, sorry. They have level A, which means that we have authenticated the customer and that they own the DID. Um, and basically that means that all DIDs that Epitomy owns, that our customers have through Epitomy, they will receive that level of attestation as long as you're sending them as the caller ID. Um, if you have a DID that you are using that is not with Epitomy but is being sent as the caller ID as the caller ID over our SIP trunks. So if you have some other number that's hosted with some other provider and you're sending it over our SIP trunks, we're going to have to attest that B unless you have a document on file with us indicating that you own the number and that you're going to notify Epitomy of any changes in the ownership status. So that way we can sign your call as A if you prove to us that you own the number, essentially. um, and you're the that's really the only way that we're going to be able to sign them as A, because level B specifically says that we trust the connection, but we're not sure about who owns that number. And so this is likely the fate of calls forwarded with the caller ID that is not owned by Epitomy, basically like any normal legitimate caller ID. On your outbound on your Epitomy PBX, you want to turn off the use PSTN CID for now. If you want the calls to be attested A, I think what's going to happen is, and this is what we're going to have to figure out. Well, hold on. Let me get through this, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the different levels. So, in terms of forwarding, there is a new specification coming out that is not finalized, so we don't actually know the end result on what's going to happen with forwarding. But there is a way that they're going to allow that to occur, but there's going to have to be multiple signatures involved. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and we're going to go try to support any new technology that comes out with regard to that. But it's not finalized yet. So how we're going to send through another like if you want an A attestation right away, you can just turn it off and send your caller ID. You can pick a caller ID that you're not using very often, and you'd know that those were forwarded calls, but you're not going to know who it is. So, how they're going to deal with that, we're going to have to let that kind of let the first part of the implementation go, and then we're going to have to see what happens, basically, because we don't know how enforcement actions are going to occur. I assume someone will start assigning everything A, including calls that don't have proper things. And then there will be some action by the FCC, and I think people are going to wait to see what happens. So, but that's not our plan. Our plan is to go by exactly what the FCC wants in there, as far as we can tell. So there are extensions to STIR/SHAKEN, and hopefully that will accommodate the forwarding. Level C indicates that the call originated from a known gateway, but nothing else can be verified about the call. We're not really planning on sending level C at this time. It could be that we end up not blocking totally invalid calls and signing them as C, but at this point, if you send something like a caller ID that says asterisk, we're going to block it. We don't really want to be signing calls that say they come from asterisk. We want to sign calls that say they come from a legitimate number. This has always been the case with, generally with PRIs and other types of PSTN connectivity. So, this isn't really that new of a requirement. Part of the problem is the standardization on forwarding and privacy headers and whatnot, and whether or not any of that's going to be respected at all that remains to be seen. So, what effects will it have? Overall, IPitomy we have to validate the caller ID being sent. We still expect the normal 10-digit format that we're currently using. Invalid numbers will not be signed and the call will fail. So if you send asterisk or 100 or 99452 or 11 digits that are a nonsense number, the call is not going to be signed. And it won't go through. We're not going to be able to pass traffic to, certainly after September 28th, but we're planning on starting to implement this on, June 24th of this year. So, we'll have to see. I mean, we're talking about a very small number of calls right now. When we started looking at this, there were maybe 700 calls a day. And I think we're down to maybe 200 or so. And this is out of many thousands of calls that go out like that. So we're not going to be there's not that much traffic that's affected in general, but we do need to get things configured properly so that they aren't sending the invalid caller IDs. So a forwarded number or otherwise valid 11-digit numbers will be attested as B because we don't know about the ownership of the number. Somehow we have to know about the ownership of the number to attest it A. High-risk calling numbers are going to be blocked. This is not currently the case, and we have not seen any of these numbers. But what happens is there are numbers on PSTN numbers that are flagged as do not originate, and we have a filtering mechanism that can tell whether or not these numbers are flagged that way. And we will not send or sign this traffic if it originates, if someone tries to send it with that caller ID. If there is some reason, if something's a city or a town that is able to do that for some reason, they'll have to contact support and explain how that is, and we'll have to look into it because the flagging them as do not originate really means that they're not supposed to send out a number, send out any phone calls. So anyway, Another requirement of filing in the robocall database is that we have to have a plan and we have to be aware of illegal robocalling activity. And if we become aware of it, we are obligated to block it. And we also aren't allowed to be willfully negligent on it. They actually have language in there that suggests that. We have to deal with robocalling as we find it. So we have another thing that's going on with our calling, and we haven't made this available to our customers yet, and we're trying to figure out how exactly we're going to make this available. But we basically have a reputation score that we get that's based on it's based on spam services that are if you subscribe to a spam service and you report a number as spam. We have it's also based on numbers that are known to be bad. Like there's a FCC database that's incorporated in there. But essentially, if we find there are a lot of calls that are going out with what's considered a bad reputation, I mean to us it basically means that if there is any spam filtering on the far end, you're likely to be blocked. And spam filtering is now something that the FCC requires that people allow. So anybody who implements spam filtering, decides to turn on something that looks at the reputation of the calls, and if they're over, their bad reputation score goes over a certain level, they just, send it to voicemail. So that may end up happening with those calls. But we'd also like to make people aware that those, because we do have a number of those. There aren't that many, but there are a number of, that we could, notify people that, they have been flagged as spam calls. But we can also work with the reputation service to help restore a number's reputation in the event that there actually is, if it's not legitimate. Like one thing that I've noticed personally is, uh, our school district here sends out things to parents, and somebody, I don't know if they were left, got stuck in the system, or if they just don't like to get phone calls, but they flagged it as spam, and then the school district started getting flagged as spam. So that's obviously been rectified because I don't see it anymore. But it's the same type of thing. We would have to put them, talk to the reputation service and make sure that they're, it's okay for them to do that sort of thing. All right, so yes, this is one of the things. One of the benefits is that now we can now offer inbound spam filtering as a feature on our trunks. Um, you should see that in the near future as something that we offer. Um, we can currently, if at no charge, if you call us up and you want us to block a specific number, we can do that, stopping a call from coming in. That's an FCC requirement that we have that. But a spam filtering service is an optional thing. So there'll probably be I'll have to look at how that works. So, um, but that we can make that available in the near future. Basically saying that if there's a number coming in with a bad reputation, we can spam filter it. One thing we're looking at is diverting those to like an inbound IVR that asks for somebody to enter a random number. But that's actually a consideration. So if you are interested in that kind of a feature, let your salespeople know, and you could also say something in the comments too, because we'd like to know what people are, if that is something people would be interested in. So now also things to watch going forward. Basically, the future of anonymous calling. Um, the headers have always existed on PRIs to hide things, but it's always pretty much an option to whether or not people are going to support that. And the question is going to be, I guess, going to become, there are headers out there. It's not fully standardized. Whether or not people are going to start respecting that, whether or not you can send anonymous through, or if you have to send like your caller ID or put it in another field. We're going to be looking into that. We'd like to just kind of standardize it. So we may have to do some engineering to standardize it so that you would always send it in one way, and then we would always allow it. Like we'd have to sign it with your number somehow, but then maybe there's a display field we can put anonymous in, and so that's kind of what we're looking at. But it's going to have to be respected by all the providers, and that's more the issue. Because right now, you pretty much have to sign things with a number. So another thing is, we're looking at solutions to catch invalid CIDs from a trunk. So if we have an authenticated trunk, one thing we need to do is we need to set everybody a main number. So we have to go through all of our accounts, and we have to basically define what a lot of companies call the business telephone number, or a default number. But what we'd like to do is put a catch-all on the trunks that allow us to just substitute this number in if somebody's trying to send asterisk, or their extension number as the caller ID. But that's we don't have that fully implemented yet, but we are working on that. So be aware that I guess when you fill out new forms, you're going to be asked to define that number from your list of the IDs. And and it would help too once we start implementing this. We could, people who we've defined a new business telephone number for, if they have an old account, obviously we can get them going right away if they're having a problem with that. So yeah, again, the forwarding specification is going to be finalized, and we're looking for, we're going to be looking to put changes to that in PBX software. Likely, it'll be, just a change that we have to handle, sending some sort of signal to our network, in the event that we would, somebody would use PSTN CID and it's an inbound call going out. So we're just gonna have to figure out what the best functionality is for all that, what the best way to do that is going forward. So we're going to start implementing validation and signing starting on 6/24. And if you have any questions about that, like what would be the best way to make sure you had a default number on your PBX and things like that, please contact support, and they can help you with any of those issues. Also, for any dealers that are here, I wanted to let them know that we're going. If anybody has an ACL on their media, for RTP, which is typically 10,000 through 20,000, we don't actually recommend that you lock down those ports. But if you have an ACL on them, then you're going to need to allow those 2 new IPs, and an announcement's going to be coming shortly that we're going to be using those. Basically to support more traffic on our servers, and we're going to be able to validate the call quality a little bit better, so we can tell. We'll be getting live readings on the scores of all the legs of the calls, and this gives us a better control over that, just so we can ensure that the calls that are connected have high quality. Essentially, what that means. And I think that's it.
All right. Well, if anyone has any live questions, we do have an opportunity to answer them here before we end for the day. The only question I got so far came from Carl Navarro, asking about if they're using low volume, not robocalling, why can't you send forward caller ID? But as I understand it, that came from we're still waiting on the final FCC specification on those rules.
Yeah, well, basically what the FCC says is that everything on your network has, everything crossing your network has to be signed, and we're going to sign it, and you'll be a tested level B. In our testing right now with level B, I think that a spam filtering service might block a level B at that station. It would still send it through, but it might not let it ring the phone. Like, it would give you a notification. We know that with one person that had a Verizon cell phone that happened. So it could be that there's a way to go in your spam filtering service on Verizon and say always allow this number, or always don't block these things. But I don't know how you could just allow any random number. That's the issue. So yeah, it would be nice if that was the case, but I think the FCC has had it with anonymous numbers. So yeah. They've put some strict limits on what we can do.
Yeah, I think the suggestion you had earlier about using maybe one of your DIDs that you're not actually using for anything as your forwarding number, that may be viable. Maybe the best solution right now until we get those rules.
Yeah, if you just always want to know which one's a forwarded call or not, yes, that's one way to do it. I mean, if you're not spam filtering, you can test it and see if B goes through. But there's, I think Bs will go through as long as you don't have a specific spam filtering service on. I think it's really only going to be if you have a specific, if you have the thing that says, I don't want spam calls. It may be that they will not accept a B. I'm not, again, it's all, it's a very fluid situation right now. I'm sure we will start getting input on what needs to be done and what needs to change from various, there's going to be a lot of carriers have been given a lot of leeway to block traffic on their networks. So it's just going to be an interesting thing going forward. I think it's going to be better because I personally am really tired of all the fake number calls. I know I get calls from people who say, "Oh, well, why did you call me?" And I didn't, but I get it all the time. I can't wait till it's not possible to do that, or at the very least, we can trace them down. But I can tell you that while we're going to be able to trace some of this stuff down, I still think there's still a big hole, and that's going to be that IP traffic is not validated in the same way that SIP traffic is. And so, hacking is going to become a lot more prevalent. People are going to try to hack into phone systems, and then that's going to have a lot bigger spotlight on it, which may be a good thing because I think we do need stronger enforcement of what's essentially breaking and entering. It's just electronic. So
All right, well, I still don't have any other questions from chat yet. Oh, we got one from Scott Goodman here. Says, how will legitimate calls flagged as spam be handled and fixed? So, legitimate call that gets incorrectly flagged as spam. Scott, I think you're going to have to end up calling support in and reporting that call or reporting that number and letting us do the investigation on our side to fix it. But from an engineering standpoint, what do you have?
Oh, we would just, we'd have to talk to the reputation service. I mean, we'd see if we're getting a bad reputation for that number as well. We do see that we get a report of the numbers that are bad. So what we're going to have to do is, you know, look at each one of those and see, why they're being flagged that way. And if it's totally legitimate, that's one thing. And the other thing is what it constitutes a robocall. I don't think that's entirely clear as well. Like totally automated calls is certainly one of them. But generally, they're totally automated, unwanted calls. Like not like the school district announcing something or something that's important. Like saying, get out of the area. There's a hurricane or a tornado or something. So those can be automated, but it's more things like a completely automated message that tries to talk to you like you're a human and then tries to sell you something. I
Yeah.
think they don't want that. As far as like predictive dialers and things like that, that's going to become, I think that'll be talked a lot and scrutinized a lot more going forward.
I got another good one here from Carl. He's asking how they can help, how the dealers can help. As he reports, he gets tons of calls daily from disconnected or stolen numbers. And previously, I know, like you'll get a call from someone using my caller ID that definitely wasn't me, so stolen numbers that way. How can the dealers help us out here with those?
Well, actually, just doing what you're, just helping to make sure that all the caller IDs we're sending are valid is the big thing because it's sort of that's just doing our part, because everybody else is going to have to be doing that as well. And the traffic coming into our network, we are planning on at the same time validating that as well. So the calls that are coming in well, they'll have a signature. So um, I think we have to see like what's going on going forward with this, but we should be getting the actual identity headers coming through to us, and we should be able to validate that those are real calls. um, they should, if people start finding out that there's spam calls coming from signed traffic, I think that's where the FCC is going to start getting involved. And I think that that's sort of the thing that's like we're not entirely sure. I think people are going to be afraid though to just based on the way it all looks to sign traffic that isn't a number that they legitimately own. So or they certainly don't want to test it as class A uh, phone traffic.
Yeah, so I think Carl, to really hammer it in, once the attestation starts going live across the industry, not just with us, obviously, um, if you continue to still get those calls, and I think they're going to be cut way down by just the implementation, you still end up getting calls that are not in compliance with these new rules, report them to us. We'll need the actual call examples, and I believe we will have some recourse on our end to report those or track them down with the FCC to, or an upstream carrier from us, and report that carrier as passing along invalid calls, which will get that carrier in trouble. I think that actually addresses both of your questions there.
Yeah.
His second question, the follow-up during your explanation, was asking so they can skirt the law by just using a predictive dialer. And I think that's going to get cut down a lot as well.
I don't think so. I think the predictive dialer is a kind of a question. Is it? I mean, if you have humans on the other end, I don't know what. I mean, I think different states have different laws too with regard to it, and I think that's where it's going to become kind of a gray area. Um, so yeah, I mean, essentially, we have to start looking at what is bad reputation traffic, and there we're gonna follow what the industry practices are in terms of standard practices are in terms of when we get bad reputation traffic, what are we supposed to do? That doesn't mean if you get a signed traffic and it's signed, I mean that's different than bad reputation, because we can sign stuff with a bad reputation. We can attest it still, but it might have a bad reputation because it is actually something it's a computer calling people or something like that. So that's what we're going to have to start figuring out. It's not perfect, but I think it makes it a lot harder to hide where the calls are coming from. That's for sure.
All right, John Church has asking if we can post something on the RTP and ACLs, and asking if that's under host access. John, no, that's going to be under access control list. Host access is just for troubleshooting purposes.
We don't create an RTP ACL at all on our PBX.
We'll do is we'll make sure.
If you put an ACL on your port forward for 10,000 through 20,000 to one of our PBXs, that would be the only place. You can just forward that, or you can put an ACL on it.
What we'll do is we'll make sure that you have a resource on the wiki that lists any sort of valid IP addresses that we use, so that if you do any sort of lockdowns to our traffic, you'll have a quick list for it. Scott Goodman comes with, if new DIDs purchased through IPitomy have poor reputation scores, is there any way to improve their scores? I.e., basically, if they purchase a DID from us that maybe has previously been tainted and then dropped by whoever was using it previously, will IPitomy provide only DIDs with highly rated reputation scores, or do we have a way to clean up those reputation scores from prior use?
We should be able to talk to the reputation company about that if there's new ownership on a number. I would assume. Like I said, we haven't really dealt with that whole situation yet, because we haven't seen what the effect is. So, but yeah, I mean, my guess is that some providers are just going to start blocking people if they have a bad reputation in general. Not even they don't even care about the signature. So yeah, I think we're going to have to look at that. It's something you should talk to support about, and we will absolutely contact the reputation company and see what we can do to get that fixed.
Yeah, again, just to reiterate, any sort of issue you've got, whether it's needing help or needing to report some behavior, or trying to report a DID that ends up having a low reputation score, IPitomy tech support is always going to be your channel to getting these things resolved. Of course, if there's a call involved, we're going to need call reports, but that's always going to be an option to you. At the moment, I don't have any more questions. I guess we'll take another minute to give you any sort of last minute thoughts, any sort of questions, and then we'll wrap up. I got no more questions coming in. Any last minute thoughts on your end?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I just think that I'm actually kind of excited about it because it's I think it's sort of it should start getting rid of the random phone calls with fake phone numbers and at the very least we'll be able to tell whether or not the number is owned by the person, and that's where all this attestation level stuff is coming from. So, you know, yeah, I have some questions as to how people are going to use their newfound abilities to determine whether or not people's calls are valid or not. But um, I think as a whole, it's all part of a process that involves protecting phone numbers and the value of a phone number. It's a phone number is really just an entity that is it's regulated in a certain way, and that's where the value comes from, because it's not it's not just an email address. It's a specifically regulated uh, assignment. And so that gives it more legitimacy to have this sort of validation on it. So
10 Acre writes in that they actually received a scam call spoofing their own ID and one of their legit DIDs on Tuesday, asking any thoughts. A 10 Acre, I think that goes back to, that's going to stop happening as much once the rules are in place. Right now, we don't really have a whole lot of recourse, but these rules give us that recourse. So after the rules go into place, start reporting those calls.
yeah,
We should be able to address it at that point.
yeah, we want to go after him too, because we don't want people sending our numbers illegitimately. And so what's going to happen is eventually, uh, any phone call that goes on the PSTN have a signature and it's going to be validated. And that's also going to be in control of the FCC. If they find a signature, a certificate being used to sign all kinds of like illegal traffic, they're just going to yank the certificate, and then everybody will stop sending those calls. So um, yeah, it's gonna. I mean, I personally think it's going to be good for the industry. Um, but yeah, there's going to be a slight period of time where uh, people where weird things are happening because people people aren't quite sure how one person's going to react to the being in the reputation database versus attesting something a B or an A, or things like that. So and then forwarding, obviously, and anonymous phone calls and all of that are going to become a question moving forward, like how all of that is going to be verified.
Scott Goodman has one more, actually, a pair of really good questions here. He has, is there going to be any way for a originating caller to know that their call has been blocked or flagged as spam, such as an intercept or notification of any kind? Is there going to be any sort of feedback?
Well, yeah, we've talked about. I mean, we may divert if we have too many of them. We may start diverting them to a message, at least, that says, this is a certainly if we block something outbound that we consider spam, yes, we'll give you some kind of message. If we're blocking something that is like, what we're calling spam in this case is like, something with a bad reputation. Um, if it's going outbound with an invalid caller ID, I don't know if we're really going to send you a message about that or not. We've talked about it, but yeah, I mean, that I think it may be helpful, and it may be something we do in the near future, depending on like I said, it's a very, very small percentage of the calls, like literally like 200 calls go out a day, and that's not many when we're talking about way over 100,000, that are easily, uh, so it's a very small number. Um, so,
I
uh,
guess a good way to put it would be, Scott, if we are blocking or doing anything with that traffic, then we have the ability to give a notification of some sort. But if the block or the flagging is happening on the receiving carrier's end, then it's already past our network. We no longer have control of that call, for that portion of it. So there's not much we're going to be able to do with that.
what we can do is we can say that, yeah, you have this number. It's going, like, you could say to us, well, I feel like these are getting blocked. I can't get through. So we could go look and say, well, yeah, you have a reputation score of 100, which is really bad. And we could start a case with with the company that's doing the reputation scores. Um, so that's the sort of thing that we could do if you had a bad reputation score. But we can tell you we can tell you what we get when we look at your traffic. And I think that's what we're considering starting to send that out, but we still have to look at uh, how all that. We're certainly not blocking it right now just because something looks bad. But what it means is that anybody that has a score over over say 80 or so, that it's likely that somebody who's actually spam filtering on the other end using the same reputation service, which is pretty popular, they're going to probably block you. So that's what it means. So we want to we're going to want to find a way to get that list of calls and try to send it to our dealers. But we right now we just have the numbers, so we're going to have to come up with a way to kind of send people out a report saying, um, we have these. We notice these calls coming from your trunk, and they have a reputation score that indicates that they're spam.
Yeah. Scott also follows up with, will IPitomy accept calls that are not signed or verified from third-party carriers and providers after the compliance date? Inbound calls.
Um, I don't think so. Um, if as I understand it, on September 28th, I think that that's going to be pretty much the end of it. We would expect calls to be signed. There is an allowance for people who have an extension and all this stuff. But my question is whether or not that extension exists validly anymore. It may because they now all have all these ways of getting around it, and I think the the directive said that as soon as you get around all these barriers, you have to move forward, diligently with getting a certificate. So, um, yeah, it's to me, I there may be a small amount or something like that, or something that maybe we'd have to flag it as spam or something. Um, but I would hope that we don't have to, actually. My plan is to be checking and saying that I'm not going to pass on stuff that doesn't have an identity header. So if I come upon new information that says I should allow it, then I'll allow it. But right now I'm trying not to.
All right. Well, it looks like we are all caught up on questions. I just want to thank all of our dealers for coming out. There's some great questions today. Drew, thanks for giving that presentation. And as usual, any sort of afterthoughts, questions, comments, either in the comments on the video, you can field them to tech support, or you can field them through your sales account rep, your account manager. And with that, we will